Hello listeners, and thanks once again for tuning in to 177 Nations of Tasmania podcast. Now, Tasmania and Denmark have had a few connections over the years, not least that we have a Tasmanian girl as the Crown Princess of Denmark. And perhaps it's a coincidence, but perhaps it's also part of the reason why there was a notable increase in the number of Danes living in Tasmania in the last census. Denmark, of course, has one of the highest standards of living in the world, and so it takes some pretty strong reasons for a Dane to come and settle on the other side of the world here in Tasmania. In Lisbeth's case, it was about meeting someone special towards the end of a 2-year working holiday around Australia. Now, more than a decade later, she's living happily in Huonville with husband Adam and their 2 kids, both of whom are learning Danish. Like every good story, Lisbeth has its fair share of happy and sad moments as she shares her experiences of travelling Australia, settling in the beautiful Huon Valley, and the challenges of living so far away from family.
So I was born in Denmark, just I was born south of Copenhagen, but we only lived there for a few years. Then we moved north of Copenhagen, so I grew up there in a little country town and just had a normal life. Denmark is quite small compared to Australia, so everybody kind of lives in short distance to each other. So we'd always have these massive family gatherings at, Easter and Christmas and birthday parties, because there'd be lots, having a big family, somebody turns 30 or 40 and then we're like 40 people or something like that, these big gatherings. So it was very, very lovely.
And do you have any particularly strong memories of any of those occasions? Is there any particular occasion that stands out in your memory?
I think Christmas is always a lovely time of year, and in Denmark it's always something that we celebrate throughout December. So we start beginning of December and then we always have like candles everywhere because it's like dark that time of year. Mm-hmm. And you go out every weekend and get together, bake cookies for Christmas and sing songs and drink the hot wine, the spiced wine.
Like glühwein.
Yeah, so it's like a celebration that is pretty much going throughout December until Christmas, and then we celebrate Christmas on Christmas Eve, which is the 24th. So the whole family thing on Christmas Eve is that we get together, and then there's usually like a particular order everything's happening in. You'd have dinner, which is usually pork roast, which is pretty normal for, when you think here in Australia we can have pork roast as well, but that's, pork roast, and you'll have duck, and you'll have, all these other lovely food like potatoes that are caramelized and like everything, just making an extra effort out of everything, And then we eat the dinner, and then afterwards we'll dance around the Christmas tree. Mm-hmm. That's like a tradition. I don't think I've seen it anywhere else, where we like walking around the Christmas tree. We call it dancing around the Christmas tree. There's more walking in a circle around the Christmas tree and singing Christmas carols. And then after that, we usually sit down, and then all the kids gets to open their presents one by one, and that can go for hours sometimes.
And is it, like, especially thinking about for children, is it quite an outdoorsy culture? Like, do people still spend time outdoors in winter?
Yeah, so because usually it's so cold, the lakes freeze over, and if there is snow, then, they can play in the snow and build snowmans and stuff like that. And they'll go ice skating, and so it is very outdoorish, even though it's cold and dark.
Because I think I remember talking to a lady from Finland who was just saying it's quite normal for kids to go out into the cold and go to school when it's minus 10 or whatever.
Yeah, we would go to school. I'd be riding my bike everywhere, so that's probably one big thing, is that everywhere you go you just ride your bike, because the infrastructure is so good in Denmark. Like, there is particular bike lanes and tracks and stuff like that doesn't go along the road where there is cars. So I'd have to ride my bike to school by myself every day from year one. Compared here in Tasmania, they have to catch the bus and, that's different. But if it's been snowing and it's icy, I still have to ride my bike.
What was school like in Denmark? Like, what are your sort of memories of that experience?
It was good. I would say it's very similar to here in Australia, Tasmania. Like, you go to kindergarten through to year 10, and then there's like an upper secondary school that you can go to if that's what I did. But you have the normal classes, like I guess here in Australia you have English, but in Denmark it's called Danish. And then, history and geography and sports and art classes. And then from year 4, I think that's when we started learning other languages.
Mm-hmm.
So you learn English is definitely there. And then from year 6, you can choose to learn another language again. And I decided German because, we're right next to Germany. I don't remember much of it though, but I guess because you have to really speak it to remember it.
And was there anything at school that you particularly enjoyed or were good at maybe?
I always liked singing.
Okay.
Yes, that's probably one thing that I remember. Like, not that it really is something that, has brought me... Like, it's brought me lots of memories because throughout my life, I think I have always been happy singing. And when I went to the upper secondary school, I was in a band and playing and singing in front of a big audience. So we'd have like a concert that we'd be having once a year, at that school. So I'm wearing my dress and that because that's the year that I finished that school, and then we'd have like a final concert.
Looks like they're wearing sailor caps.
This is a tradition in Denmark that when you finish upper secondary, you get a hat, a bit like as when you finish university, I guess you get a hat, but this is like particularly for Denmark. So, and it just looks like a sailor hat, I guess. Yeah. So it's called a student hat. It just means that now you've graduated from the school. So yeah, and then we drive around in this truck on the back. Afterwards, from every student in the class, we drive to their place, and then the parents have prepared nibblies, and we'd be like all drinking beer and just, it's probably not the best way to but this is like we all get drunk and just have fun and enjoy ourselves. So yeah, so it's
a pretty big thing then.
Yes. And we'd be like singing and all that, and everybody, when you drive on the road, people would be like honking their horns and stuff like that. So it's like, it's big. You'd see these ones in July, I think it is, drive around, and they'd be everywhere, and they'd have music going at the back. Obviously, you're at the back of a truck, and you're just standing around, so they have to drive very carefully, because you're not seated with a seat belt and stuff like that. So, but as you can see, the truck is dressed up with balloons and flowers. So my parents divorced when I was 9, and then my mum moved to the other end of the country, which is not really that far when you think about it, because Denmark is very small. So it would probably be similar to, say, my mum moved to the northwest, and my dad was living in Hobart, something like that. And then, I've just been moving around a bit, I guess, because my mum was... Then we moved to Greenland after living in, the other end of Denmark for a while. So I actually stayed in Greenland for a couple of months because my mum is from Greenland, and she wanted to go back and see what it was like and if she was going to want to live there again. But then she decided to come back to Denmark after that. So because that was just close to school holidays. So I went back, spent some time with my dad, and then my mum came back to Denmark. And then, so I have been moving quite a bit around Denmark, but it's been good. I've seen different parts of the country, and because I guess, we have in Denmark a bit of rivalry in between certain cities, parts of the country. So Sealand, which is the eastern bit, usually have a rivalry with Jutland, which is on the west, because they have a different dialect of their, how they speak Danish, but it's been a good experience, I think.
And do you have any memory of Greenland? Because that would have been interesting.
Oh, yes, absolutely. So I went up there, and then I actually was meant to start school, so I went there a couple of times, and I just remember where we lived, because it was in Nuuk, which is the capital of Greenland, that I just loved. There were like mountains and rocks and stuff, which was just so different to Denmark, because Denmark is very flat.
Yeah.
So it was a beautiful country. We went sailing a few times, and I remember seeing icebergs, and I was just like fascinated with, wow, yeah, beautiful, absolutely beautiful.
So when you were maybe at school or just sort of that teen era, did you have any idea of sort of what you wanted to do with your life?
I think I just enjoyed living in the moments. Thinking back, I think I had a difficult time working out what I wanted to do once I finished school, and there was never really anything that I felt, this is what I'm going to do. I liked singing, obviously, and I liked mathematics, and I think that might be how I ended up working as a bookkeeping. I ended up doing some bookkeeping and administration jobs, and then I just had some opportunities come my way, and I was going to do an education in becoming a property manager because I thought, that looks interesting. And then by that time, I was just coming out of a long relationship, and I was just ready to experience some other things and see the world. And I had a friend who was in Sydney, and then she said, why don't you come over here and we can do some backpacking together? And I was like, okay, let's do that. And then that's how I ended up in the first place to coming to Australia.
So you came to Australia, and what happened then?
Well, I was going to travel around with my friend, my childhood friend, but she was only here for a couple of days, and then she went back home, and then I was in Sydney, and I didn't know which way to go, but I had already contacted family in Northern Queensland about coming to work with them, because I always wanted to experience the outback. So I ended up travelling up to Bluff Downs, which is a cattle station between Townsville and Chowders Towers, and I stayed there for 4 months as a jillaroo.
Wow, that's different.
Yes, it was. I really enjoyed it. It's funny because, it was just so different than working in an office and then coming and doing something like that, where you just in the elements and in the...
And what were some of the things that you had to do as part of that?
So I had to get up 6 a.m. every morning and go and make sure the calves were fed, because some of the calves were either abandoned by their mothers, or their mothers couldn't feed them because their udders would... Sometimes they get too full, and then they... Anyway, they have problems with their udders, some of them. So I had to help. We had some cows that would come in every morning, and I would then let the calves into the cows, and then they would have a drink. And then it's so cute, we'd name all the calves, I think one was named Elvis because it was darker one, and he looks like he had blue suede shoes or something. But anyway, we'd be driving around in a ute, and I'd be pushing off these 200 kilo blocks, from the truck and that. So I actually got a nickname because of that. Celeste, that I was working with, she started calling me Mighty Mouse.
Okay.
Because, it was quite small, and then there I was pushing off these big...
And so that was 4 months of doing that?
Yeah, it was. It felt so much longer though, I guess, because thinking back, I just have so many memories.
And what's your maybe best or strongest memory of that time?
I think just the connection that me and Celeste had, like we worked really well together, and, you know, she taught me so many things because I just come to Australia and I didn't really know how to speak properly. Like, you know, how I'm talking now is like very fluent English, but back then it was very word by word, and I had to think a lot about what I was going to say, then translate it in my head. And she'd be talking very fast, and I'd be like looking at her with this blank face, and she'd go, "Are you with me?" And I'd go, and I wouldn't say anything, and then she'd go, "Okay, I'll just explain it again," and then she'd say it again, and then I'd be, "Okay, yeah, now I get it." So just little things like that. She was really good. Just, you know, support and, yeah, feeling that I belong somewhere, you know, outside of where I come from.
And so what did you do after that?
Then I travelled around a bit again. So my dad actually came down with my stepmum and we travelled the East Coast together. So we started off in Brisbane. I picked them up. I travelled to Brisbane, and then we had a camper van. Then we drove up the East Coast all the way up to Cairns, which was a nice experience, you know, having to see a different country with my dad. And then they were going to go to Darwin, and then I travelled. That was the first time I went to Tasmania. Okay. So not the time that I was staying, but then I came to Tasmania, and I did a bit of travelling here, and ended up doing Great Ocean Road after that, going to Kangaroo Island. Ended up in Adelaide working for BHP for 5 months, because then I had my second year of working holiday visa, and then I needed to earn a bit of money to do some travelling. So I stayed there for 5 months. And then I travelled in the beginning of 2009 to Tasmania, and that's where I met Adam.
And what took you to Tasmania, actually? What prompted you to come here?
I just wanted to come back because I really enjoyed it the first time I was here, and I just felt that I wasn't finished. There was something here, and I hadn't even met Adam then. Okay. But so there must have been something about Tasmania that just really drew me here. So, and then I met Adam actually not many days after I arrived, because I take photographs of everything throughout my travels, and that I have so many photographs of places I've been. So that's how I got introduced to Adam, because he is a videographer, and then I was going to help him out with a few things, I think, and then one thing turned into another thing, and yeah, we got married.
So how did you meet actually? Was it you were introduced by
through a friend? Yeah. So I was backpacking obviously, and he had connections with the backpacker, because he used to work with Adventure Tours, I think it was called. So through that we met each other, and then it was just at our regular Aussie barbecue kind of thing. And
how did it get to the point where you got married? Because you said it was 6 months between meeting and...
Yeah, so that is not really long, is it?
It's all relative, I suppose.
Yeah, I guess. So yeah, we fell madly in love, I guess. Just we were working together, doing a few things, and then my visa was going to run out, and we were talking about if I was going to go back, how were we going to, what was going to happen then. And then Adam was just like, well, let's just get married. Mm-hmm. And the funny story is, when I left Denmark in 2007, the last thing my dad said to me was, don't go and get married. And then, so I told Adam this. I said, this is actually what my dad said. And he said, oh, I better give him a ring then. So he actually rang him. And he said, g'day, Carlo. And my dad was like, oh, hello. And then Adam would say, I'm going to marry your daughter. And yeah, my dad obviously was, I guess he was shocked, but he was just like, oh, really? Oh, that's fantastic. I think he was, leaning into the possibility that, yeah, I must have met someone very special. And
do you remember how you, like when he suggested it, what went through your head at that time? Did you just suddenly think, oh, that actually makes sense? Or did you have to process it?
No, I think we were just so madly in love that we just felt this is the right thing for us. That connection was just so strong, and I couldn't really imagine going back home and then not being with Adam. So
Yeah.
yeah,
So would you say it was a fairly easy decision in the end?
it was.
You didn't have to think a long time about it?
Not at all. So we ended up getting married at Peppermint Bay. Very small wedding because we didn't have enough money to have like a big party. But also we wanted to travel back and have our honeymoon in Denmark so that Adam could finally meet my family. And which was a good idea because my dad then organised a small gathering kind of wedding on a wooden boat. When we came back, it was summer in Denmark. And on this big boat, wooden boat, where the captain, you can almost imagine like he's dressed up as Captain Haddock from Tintin, you know, like he's very captainy. I don't know if I can say that. And then because we have a big tradition in Denmark of when you're getting married, the groom gets his socks, the tips of his socks cut off. And his tie. So because it was summer and Adam was wearing thongs and T-shirt and all that, my dad had gone out of his way to get socks and a tie. So and then they just put it on him, and then they cut the socks and the tie. It's kind of I think it's kind of a signal of, you know, now you're cutting ties with the old.
So after you got married and started settling down in Tasmania, what happened there?
Well, Adam and I bought a house here in Huonville, and then we lived here for a few years before we decided to have children. So now we have 2 boys, Oscar and Jack. So, and it's actually interesting because I decided to travel back to Denmark when I was pregnant with Oscar and give birth to him there. I think the main reason was I wanted to be close to my mum, being a big new thing happening, you know, becoming a mum and all that. So that was good. Travelled over there, gave birth to, and Adam actually came over for the birth. I travelled over earlier because you can't travel too close to your due date. You know, there's certain rules about that. So. And then Oscar was christened because that's a tradition that we have in Denmark. He was christened before we travelled back home. So my dad, he actually came here to Tasmania after Oscar was born, and he got to experience this beautiful island with us. We went a few places down to Ida Bay Railway, and we went to Mona, you know, and around in Hobart and stuff. So that was really lovely, you know, that he got to experience where I live. But then after Jack was born, not long after that, he got really ill with cancer, and we weren't too sure how long he had. So I decided to travel over there to have Christmas with him, and I took Jack with me. He was only a baby. And because that's a special time of year for us, I just wanted to have one more time with him.
Yeah. And you mentioned that your sister was also had sort of prepared something for Christmas.
Yeah, so lucky my sister had arranged this family get-together, family Christmas at her house with my mum and my dad there, which was really good because since my mum and dad divorced, they hadn't really been in contact. So it was great to have them there together and just being as a family, you know, like my brother, my sister and my parents. And
we also able to spend New Year with him?
Yeah, so I think that was, he then travelled back because he lived in another area of the country, and then but I spent some time after New Year's with him as well, so yeah.
And then how long before he passed away after that?
So in September that year, that following year, I got a phone call from my sister where she said to me that this is it, and I guess, it's always difficult. Like we kind of expected it, but then getting the phone call, it's kind of a shock, It's but I just threw everything I had and then booked a flight and travelled over there the following day as fast as I could because I wanted to make it, wanted to make sure that I made it.
Yeah. And so you did make it in time?
Yeah, I did, yeah. So luckily, so he was put into this ward on an elders' home where they have people that are dying. And I got to see him, and I just remember seeing him and then just feeling, wow, this might be the last, this will be the last while that I see him, and it was just heartbreaking. But lucky, my sister and my brother and I were able to stay in the room next to him and spend the last days with him because he was still able to talk, and he's very stubborn, so he would still eat soup and still ask the staff to get out of his bed to sit up, and even though it wasn't really good for him. But I remember one afternoon, and me and my sister were standing next to his bed, and he was sitting up and he could look out the window, and we were talking to him, and then all of a sudden he's pointing to the window, and both me and my sister looked out, and there's this massive red full moon just coming up of the horizon. And I just remember that magical moment, the three of us just looking at this moon. I think in particular because of that full moon, every time it's a full moon I always think of my dad.
How much of your own Danish heritage and culture have you tried to pass on to your kids, and are they connected to that or interested in that?
Yes.
At least so far.
Mm-hmm. So it was very difficult at the start to keep speaking English. Keep speaking Danish, sorry. I was speaking Danish before they started talking and all that. But then once they started talking, they'd reply back in English, and then I'd reply back in English. And then if Adam walked into the room, I'd say it in English because then he understood what I was saying, because Adam hasn't learned Danish. So that has been difficult. But every Sunday, my boys does a Danish class on Zoom with a lady who's based in Denmark. They have so that Jack, he's only 8. He's doing 20 minutes because, the concentration bit is... And then Oscar does 45 minutes. And so they're learning how to speak Danish. And I think that's the one thing that I felt was important to me, learning the language, keeping that. And Oscar is showing great interest in Denmark. So over at his school, whenever they have to do a project of something, he likes to talk about Denmark, and he researches things and looks up, we've got Hans Christian Andersen, who's, the author. We've got Lego. We've got The Little Mermaid, the statue. We've got Princess Mary. So I wasn't sure if they were wanting to do it, but luckily, yeah, they're happy to do it, and it just happens that the teacher that they're having is very engaging with them, so very lucky there.
And I guess that's a real bet that will be a benefit for them later in life with relatives, communicating with relatives in Denmark.
Yeah.
Even though I'm sure that relatives can speak English, it's still a little bit of a barrier, isn't it?
A little bit, I would say. Not so much for the younger ones, so my niece and nephew, but more so for my mum. When she comes over, she does know how to say things, but sometimes she will say a sentence and then every second word will be Danish, you know, and then so people will be looking at her, not knowing what she means and stuff.
But it's just not. I think it's nice, isn't it, for older people to hear their grandkids speak in their native tongue would be something special. I think.
Yeah, it is. She's enjoying it when she sees them on Zoom, or we do FaceTime. In
what ways do you maintain contact and connection with Denmark and your family there?
Yeah, so once a week I FaceTime with my mum, and then it's just, a regular thing that we do. We talk about what we've been up to, and it's just like, I guess when you talk to people and they're like, might be talking to their parents that are living interstate, I guess it's a bit similar, you get on the phone, you talk to them, once a week and catch up. But where we're doing more like FaceTime, I guess, because it's just nice to look at each other and, and stay connected, yeah. So my mum was here last time in 2019, and she travelled back home just before the pandemic hit. She made it home, and then I think it was a couple of weeks after that, and everything was in lockdown.
Yeah.
So that was kind of lucky, that she didn't get stuck here. It would have been nice to have her, but for so long would have probably been a bit of a challenge, So currently I'm studying psychology because I decided a few years ago, not a few years ago, I decided quite some time ago now, that after having Jack and doing a bit of office work, that I wanted to do something different. So I actually started pursuing a Bachelor of Education because I felt I wanted to become a teacher, because I was doing volunteering at my son's school. And then I thought, this is fun. I'm having fun. Maybe I can become a teacher and be that person that makes a difference for students. So I started doing a Bachelor of Education, and then halfway through the pandemic hit, and I had a unit that was looking at the psychology of education, and I felt, this is actually more interesting. And also because I had to homeschool my children, I was feeling I'm not too sure this is what I want to do. And standing in front of a big group of children, maybe I just want to be working one-on-one with people. So I decided to change from Bachelor of Education to Bachelor of Arts, majoring in psychology.
What stage are you now with that?
So I'm in my last semester, so
Okay.
not far to go now.
Is there anything that you would like to do with the psychology, or an area that appeals to you?
So I think I'm just, the more I have studied, the more I realise that mental health is an area that is very passionate to me. So it will be in that area, in that space somewhere.
Tell us about where you have settled, because maybe some people will not be familiar with Huonville and what kind of place it is.
Huonville is so beautiful and lush, and just a really nice valley town. We just love it here. We can walk everywhere we want to go down to the cafe. There's a really nice community at the local cafe. You walk in, grab a coffee, have a chat with people that from around here. So it's just so nice, yeah.
So is it quite a connected sort of community around here?
Well, I feel that, it is, for me, like, you connect with people, and we're very close with our neighbours too. Funny story, last year we had to do this massive renovation on our house, and the builders found this flood underneath our house, which then ended up in an insurance kind of thing, and we had to move out of the house so that they could repair it, and we didn't know where to go. But then our neighbours, Pete and Karen, were saying, we are actually travelling around Australia in our camper van. How about you just stay at our house for a while? And we were like, really? You don't get that every day, do you? Wow, that was like, I'm just so grateful So we stayed there for like 3 months until they came back. And then we had to travel from Airbnb to Airbnb for another 3 months. So I got to see a bit of the valley because we couldn't just go anywhere because our boys go to school down in Cygnet. So we had to try and stay close. So I guess because I'm studying psychology and I feel very passionate about mental health, there is the Suicide Prevention Day coming up next weekend. So I've organised a 9-kilometre walk, just walking up the top of the scenic hill here in Huonville. So 9 kilometres is 1 kilometre for every person that dies to suicide each day in Australia. I just felt this is a way that I can create that awareness in the community because I feel passionate about it. So, yeah, I think it's important that we, are able to communicate about our mental health because sometimes it becomes a bit of a taboo. You can't talk about things like that. But I think it's important to, especially like coming to Australia as from a different country. I think I've been through a few of those, hurdles where you feel homesick and you got that culture shock they talk about. You kind of experience a few emotions there, thinking, is this okay? Am I going to get out of this kind of thing? So, yeah, I think it's just a thing that is important to talk about so that people know that it's not a bad thing to talk about it.
Do you find, and I'm asking this because other people have also mentioned it, that people here are a bit less willing to share their more personal and deeper feelings than perhaps in Europe?
Yeah, that's probably another thing that I find is very different. So in Denmark, I feel that when I'm not sure if that's because, the people that I've been talking to have been like close friends and relatives and stuff like that, but it's more accepted that you talk about personal things that's going on in your life. Where here, if I remember getting here and then people are asking, oh, how are you going? And then you start talking about how you are and people are just like looking at you with this weird look like, I just wanted you to say, I'm good or something, I didn't really want to hear the whole story. So that part has been a hurdle, but I have just come to accept that is how it is, learning there are different boundaries in this country than in Denmark.